I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president.
And that's the moment that even Biden's handlers and apologists saw the writing on the wall. And while Joe Biden wasn't a spring chicken in 2020, one doctor points out that the president, who likely has had at least 6 COVID jabs, has gotten neurologically much worse since the rollout of the jabs. And joining us now is Dr. Peter McCullough, who has some specific insight into what he believes is going on with the president's health overall, but particularly his mental condition. Tell us what you saw in that press conference last night, looking at him from a medical perspective.
You know, Biden started out strong, but you could tell that he started to fade quickly. He stammered on the questions, even who to pick next. And then importantly, he mixed up a few countries at times. His voice became garbled. And I can tell you as an internist and a cardiologist, I take care of patients Biden's age. I take care of patients with neurologic conditions. And one can't help but review his neurologic history. I mean, he's had 2 brain aneurysms. He's had surgery for intracranial hemorrhage in 1988. He's had chronic atrial fibrillation. He's been on a blood thinner, Eliquis. Atrial fibrillation contributes to microstrokes and clinically evident strokes. And reviewing film from 2019 to now, it's clear that Biden has had a neurological decline. I think everyone would agree with that. It started after he started taking the COVID-19 vaccines. And as we can see, by publicly disclosed information, he's taken 6 of these messenger RNA vaccines. And what I've seen in my practice is the messenger RNA vaccines, which do deposit spike protein into the brain, seem to affect people who already have neurologic histories and promote a condition that has features of both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
You know what, doctor, you said he struggled with people's names, and that really struck me because a lot of people wouldn't know from the outside, but that's a very big deal. Most of those reporters he called on, they've been in those positions or they've been at least one of the networks for years during my time there. And look, after four years, and then Biden has a history at the White House even before then with this press corps, you know all those people. You know all those reporters. You don't have to have a list and a sheet of paper to look at. They would just call on you. And so for me, it was very telling that he struggled with my former colleagues' names. So he would have known those. But I can also tell you that I was at the White House standing on the North Lawn the day that Biden walked on January 20th, 2021 during inauguration. And he shuffled then. He was very tired. He barely made it into the White House that day. And remember, they kept him behind closed doors and in the basement during the 2020 campaign, so people didn't get to see a lot of what his condition was like. I think he was already not in great health, and I think he already had some issues going on with his mental capacity. But I did have to wonder if, because he was already predisposed to some kind of neurological issues, that the jabs, if he got the real ones, and I know we're not going to talk about this today, but some batches are worse than others, right? I wondered if that is contributing to the quicker decline. And it sounds like you do believe that is the case.
Moritz was the first to describe this in a man in Germany with Parkinson's. He took 3 shots and he had a rapid decline. Now we have a paper out of Korea by Rowe and colleagues, 4 million Koreans with it's a comparative study of vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And those who took the vaccines, elderly Koreans, it really took on a risk within a few months of developing cognitive decline. So Biden's cognitive abilities, his ability to retrieve names, be crisp on point, has gone down. We can actually just directly observe that. His voice has become weaker and more garbled, so he's trying to compensate by shouting. You can tell that there is a compensation for this cognitive decline, and that's laughing, almost inappropriately laughing, like he can't remember something. We see that in Alzheimer's patients. Now, on the other side, you mentioned this shuffling gait. He is taking smaller steps. He turns in block. He doesn't make a fluid turn. And so that is consistent with Parkinson's, but he doesn't have the tremor of his hand, a classical pill rolling tremor. He seems to have relatively fluid arm movements when he's sitting. That doesn't go along with Parkinson's. So it's a blend. There is a condition where the two syndromes are blended. It's called Lewy body dementia. But in my experience, that's rapidly progressive and deadly within a few months or so. I don't think he's got Lewy body. He fits what I see in my practice is a COVID-19 vaccine-induced neurodegenerative syndrome. I published a paper with Stephanie Seneff and others giving the biologic rationale why some people who take the vaccine, and it's probably cumulative vaccines, and in this case, Biden took at least 6, that is contributing to his decline.
Dr. McCullough, there's been a lot of focus on this Parkinson's specialist that has made several visits to the White House. The White House keeps downplaying the number of visits even that he's made, or the amount of time he was there. With Parkinson's, and also his main doctor, Dr. Kevin Kennard, tried to downplay this. You've looked at the report from Dr. Kennard in detail, correct? Did it give any signs of neurological issues? And what does it mean that he's seeing this Parkinson's specialist? Is that just standard? I've not heard of that with presidents past.
Oh, the White House doctor does issue an official public report on the health of the president. And the last one was February of 2023. And you can show it to your viewers. There is no detailed neurologic exam. There is a mention of the development of a peripheral neuropathy, but there's no mention of cognitive decline or Parkinsonian features. And yet they existed during that period of time. And I look back, I think the big change, as you indicated, was somewhere around 2020. His first vaccine was taken in 2020. And he does have this extensive prior neurologic history. When I see patients like him in my office with the family members, usually the discussions are about no longer driving, can't manage a checkbook, shouldn't do cooking on, gas stoves or electric surfaces, methods to try to prevent tripping, falling, hip fractures. We start to take measures, safety measures, because Emerald, what is impending is a health event. So an intercurrent stroke, a stroke could clearly occur with this atrial fibrillation. He's on blood thinners. We know the spike protein from the vaccine promotes blood clots in patients like him, despite being on blood thinners. An aspiration pneumonia, a fall and a hip fracture. I would not be surprised at all if we are told that a sudden health event has now occurred because he is so frail and vulnerable.
I wouldn't be surprised by that either. Honestly, I've been surprised based on what I saw the first day of him being in office, personally observed firsthand. I really didn't think the man would make it this long. I'm actually quite surprised by that. And you mentioned you would tell, the family members of patients that you can't manage a checkbook. I mean, think about how concerning it is. Perhaps this man has the largest checkbook. He's in some ways in charge of America's checkbook, and that's just absolutely scary. And while you were talking about the risk of fall, we were playing some footage of Biden. He literally almost fell at the moment. You said that. I agree. I think they know this. I think that in some ways Democrats, and this is my speculation, you're a doctor, you don't have to get into this. Democrats almost feel like at this moment, if he had a health event, that could almost save them, right? Because they're in a conundrum. They don't know what to do. What is the let's talk about the ethical implications of his doctor allowing all this to go on, because clearly the doctors are, his doctor is in on it to make sure he can stay in power. But medically and ethically, that seems unethical.
You brought up an important point of saving face. Now, normally the family steps in. When I take care of patients like this, the family steps in and says, listen, we have to do things to make sure our father, our husband is safe and that things are okay as, he progresses in his senescence. Here, Joe Biden has doubled down. Hunter Biden is not of any help here. And now other Democrats, even Hollywood figures like George Clooney are, trying to aid here in developing insight. One of the problems we see is a lack of insight. Biden cannot see himself declining. Anybody listening to this who's had a parent or grandparent with dementia will understand that the patient themselves can't see their decline. Family and others have to step in. Now, we don't have the 2024 health report for Biden. We should demand that the Biden's doctor has an obligation, an ethical obligation, to be honest with the country. Clearly, part of a general physical exam, and I'm an internal medicine doctor, I do this every day, is a neurological exam with some assessment of cognitive function. America should demand that report. We should see it. I can tell you as a doctor, I can't diagnose Biden without seeing him in the office, but I've seen enough film. Most of neurology and its diagnostic techniques is actually based on observation. Based on observation, I can tell you, I can be conclusive that he is displaying features of both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and they're not classic, they're blended. And that's suspicious of a superimposed vaccine injury syndrome on top of his background neurologic history.
We need to see that report from 2024. Thank you so much, Dr. Peter McCullough, for your expert insight into what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you.